and I will meet you where you are. I will meet you in your field.
Yeah.
I'm the king who comes to meet you in the midst of doing what you're doing.
I'll meet you doing laundry. I'll meet you, cooking. I'll meet you trying to get your kids dressed,
Oh, yeah.
You have to develop a lifestyle of worship.
Yep.
Rather than just those moments that you say, hey, I'm going to go worship.
Yeah.
Your whole life becomes worship.
Yeah. There's a lot of moments that worship looks like feeding my kids. Worship looks like serving my husband, serving my family. Worship looks like me praying in the car because it's the only time that I'm alone, or or in the shower, or before I go to bed, because it's the only moment where there's not a person on top of me.
Life of a mom,
a little
right?
kid hanging on you. So it looks different. When I was younger, before I was married, I would spend, an hour in my room, 11 o'clock at night. There's something about 11 o'clock midnight where it always just hit me, songwriting and worship. And I would just sit there and sing and worship. And that's obviously a lot harder for me now. I mean, I'm exhausted at 10 o'clock instead of, and, you just have different responsibilities. And I kind of wrestled with that. I think some of like, gosh, I just don't, like, I can't do what I did before. Like I can't, because your life changes and your different things change. And the Lord just, he reminded me that like, hey, there are different seasons of your life, and I will meet you in those places where you are in your life.
Yes.
And
he understands, right?
Yeah, exactly. And and I've talked before about the month of Elul, which it is the month of Elul as we're sitting here recording this, where it's the season where the king is in the field, and it's the season like where he's near to you. And my birthday's in August, so my birthday falls in the month of Elul. And so it was just a sweet picture of the Lord being like, hey, like you were birthed in this season of nearness to me. And I will meet you where you are. I will meet you in your field.
Yeah.
I'm the king who comes to meet you in the midst of doing what you're doing. And it doesn't mean that there's not times where where I need to steal away from that and just sit in front of my piano and worship and sing. And I do. But the Lord meets you where you are, and you can worship in all things. And I talk about that even with my kids, like, hey, obedience is worship.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When you say yes to doing the thing that someone's asked you to do, hey, this is a moment where you get to choose to worship right now. Your flesh doesn't want to, but you get to choose. And all these different ways that worship looks like. It's not only music, And so, so I hope that answers your question.
Well, but as a parent, again, I always tell the young people, the single people, I said, you have more time right now with the Lord than you'll ever have in your life.
People told me that.
Take advantage of it.
I know. I didn't believe them.
And then you get married, and it's like, okay, you have less, but you still have more time now than you will when you have kids. Then you have kids, and a lot of people go through that struggle. Yeah. And what happens is your time with the Lord has to change, and you understand that, he doesn't just meet me in my room in a closet by myself.
Yeah.
He'll meet me doing the dishes with a kid pulling at your pants.
Absolutely.
Or
in a conversation with my kid. We're talking, I was talking with Shiloh about when the Lord was crucified and that veil, did you know that the veil in the temple, there was a veil there and it ripped from top to bottom when he was crucified. Do you know why it did that? She's like, no, why? I'm like, because there's this point of access now. The veil is ripped and now there's access to his heart. And I'm just sitting there having this explanation, conversation with her. And I'm literally weeping, thinking about, oh my gosh, he's so right here, he's so close, and she's like, why are you crying?
Are you okay, Mom?
Are
you okay?
He tore the veil. It just literally, I literally can't even think about it without crying. And it's just this accidental moment of hey, I'm right here, I'm so close to you, I'm right where you are. And again, it's just a beautiful picture. The Lord just meets you.
I think, even Camila, my wife, has, you just go into season with kids, and the Lord is so kind and gracious, and he's so loving, and he's like, look, I'll meet you doing laundry. I'll meet you, cooking. I'll meet you trying to get your kids dressed, I'll meet you. And so it's like those times shift and change. And I think what happens is you have to develop a lifestyle of worship.
Yep.
Rather than just those moments that you say, hey, I'm going to go worship.
Yeah.
Your whole life becomes worship because it just is about that constant communication and connection with him where, you let yourself be overwhelmed by his goodness, his graciousness, his love and affection, and everything else. And it's produced in life, like you were saying earlier. It expands. Your idea of worship expands. So, as a pastor, on staff as well, it's on Sunday mornings. There's a lot of times like I'm in worship and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, Lord, we're about to get in the zone, right? And then, my little girl or my little boy comes up and says, Daddy, I got to go to the bathroom.
Right.
It's like, okay, all right, let's go. And,
right.
And as I think, you grow into it and you realize that the Lord he would rather you focus on your kids, raise your kids, pour into your kids, take the time with your kids, than neglect that, withdraw into your closet and spend hours and hours and hours there.
I know. I love what you were talking about on Sunday about how like living your relationship with the Lord in front of your kids. And I had no idea. Like I'll read my Bible first thing in the morning. So it doesn't happen first thing in the morning. It never happens.
Yeah.
So I'll wake up and get my coffee and read my Bible. And my kids will come out. They'll wake up and they'll come out and they'll see me every day in that chair reading my Bible.
Yep.
And I didn't do it, for that reason. I do it because I want to read and I want to, have time with the Lord before the day starts. And she'll go get her little Bible and she'll sit right there with me and read her little kid Bible or whatever with me. And she'll ask about the Bible and want to, like, Mom, we didn't read the Bible today. Of course, she can't read. She's 5 and she's 4, the other one's 4. So they can't really read yet, but they'll sit there and they'll look at the words just like I do. Okay, what are we reading today, Mom? Okay, well, find Deuteronomy and find chapter 14. And, and so we talk about this. And I'll read a little passage of what I'm reading, but it just like blew my mind. It seems so obvious, but it just blew my mind of like, golly, just the choices, that we make as parents to pursue the Lord in our daily life. They literally watch that and then they want to mimic that. Yeah. And so the choices that we make to live our relationship with the Lord in front of them like that and include them and pray out loud in the car or in the house instead of praying internally all the time. I've intentionally tried to, pray out loud. Okay, let's pray about this. Let's talk about this. So they can both hear me praying all the time.
Yeah, they see it and it becomes like, I see it. I don't just hear my parents tell me this, but I see them living it.
Yeah.
And before last Sunday, I was talking with Camila about, just the importance of parents and growing up. And she grew up in a household where her dad and he still is very involved in her mom.
Yeah.
But she was like, look, I just remember my dad. And you go over there, even now when we go to visit and stay down there for weeks or whatever, every day, have his Bible out. He'll be reading it, writing, you see it. But she says, I remember waking up sometimes at 2 a.m. and walking out to go get water, and my dad would be out there praying. Oh, wow. I mean, the impact that has on your life, right? Yeah. There's some story that she came out. Her dad was on his knees praying in front of the couch, and she walks up and she goes, "Daddy." He goes, "Oh!" Scared the heck out of him. but the thing is she sees that, and it builds something in you as a child, or it builds something in your children if you allow them to see that instead of trying to say, "Hey, let me do my mom and dad things, get you guys in bed or whatever, and then let me do this in private because I need my time." Yeah, learning how to find God in the chaos of family is one of the growth factors of becoming a parent, right?
Absolutely.
So on the same line as that, being intentional with your kids, right? So intentionally letting them see your personal life with the Lord, but then being intentional. Yeah. So like with worship, what is a way that you guys are like intentional with Shiloh and Eden when it comes to worship? Like what do you guys do?
We've done a variety of things. We've done, we just call it family time. And we would try to do that on Sunday evenings together and kind of make it a weekly thing. And I would sit at the keyboard and do like a worship song like we would do here at church on Sunday. Not like, I'd do some, kids songs, but I would do some like grown-up songs or whatever. And, they're young. And this was even like a year ago that we started doing this. So even younger. So, the attention span is very short. So they would be, speaking of chaos, it would be a little wild because they would be running around, but also you can model what worship looks like for a child. Hey, like raising your hands is something biblical, like lift your hands before the Lord, clapping, dancing, whatever. but then there's also a thing of, I don't want to say, hey, you have to do this right now because this is the only way worship can look right now.
Yes.
And we're at home, so I give my kids a lot of freedom of like, as long as they're not hurting each other or hurting like the house or destroying something, then I just kind of let it happen. And it's wild, and I'm singing and they're running around, and and my husband's playing the djembe, and that's our family worship time. And I'm like, when we first started, it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. But we just kind of kept doing it. And so we did that for a while. And then now Shiloh and Eden, both of them have really taken an interest to piano themselves, where they want to play. And so I'm working with them. I'm playing simple little things. And that's been really sweet to see them play and see them sing. We'll sing together, and or I'll play guitar. And again, they'll just kind of run around. And, and I had to kind of get out of my box of, is this even like doing anything? Like they're literally just running around the room. And they're singing, but they're not doing what I think they should do during worship time. Like, where's your beautiful flowy dance? Like, why are you like, why are you on your head right now? Like we're doing worship time. Yeah. But I'm like, okay, they're in the environment all the time, and or on a weekly basis, and they're seeing us worship together as a family at home. And knowing that it's not all in a church setting, it's not all corporate, I mean, that's one topic that I teach in the class, is the difference between your personal worship time and your congregational corporate worship time. Yeah. How that they are different from one another, and they're not interchangeable in the sense, and you touched on that at the beginning when we first started, of that you can't only have corporate congregational worship. You have to have the personal moments too. And you can't, otherwise you come into that congregational setting just so desperate for the personal connection with the Lord that it can take away. If you're a worship leader, if you're in a leadership position, it can really, I don't know, it can just kind of put you in a bind. It's like you need both. And but that, it looks different, like we're saying, it looks different.
Well, it does, and it is a it's a challenge because, like you just said, this isn't what I wished it looked like. Yeah. Because, you're running around. My boy has his little stuffed alligator, and he's like, roar, and like, okay.
All the time.
What do we, well, exactly, Lord, are we even doing anything? And then you are, and as they get older, they get used to, okay, just like, with us praying before meals, when we first started, I mean, their attention span's like 5 seconds. And so now, much better. Yeah. Much better. But it is like that balance between, I'm not about to command you and be like, you're going to do this and this and this, because then they're like, this isn't, I don't want this. I don't want to do this. I'm being forced into something, right? Yeah. But then also trying to kind of shepherd them in and be like, well, okay, well, let's come and do this. And let's not do that. No, don't tackle your sister, don't pull your brother's hair, whatever, and trying to do it, but understanding that the mercy and grace of the Lord is there, and it's so important about just modeling, like, hey, we're going to take the time and do this as a family, together,
definitely, yeah.
And there's a bunch of different ways. I think a lot of it is for maybe families who are listening to help them get ideas as well of, hey, what can we do? And it might just be playing a song on YouTube. Sure. I think for me, I was, you go through these moments where you're like, is this even doing anything in my child? And then one day my boy was walking around and he was like, his name is G. I'm like, okay, yeah. He's singing the song. It's working. It's working. So
I know. We do role playing too, which my kids love that. Like, okay, we're going to role play Esther, and you be Esther. Dad's going to be Mordecai. You're going to be this character, whatever. And then one of us adults will sit there and read the actual scripture. I'm like, okay, now Esther, you say this, da da da, and so she says the lines. Of course, you got to get all dressed up. But that really helps them understand the story. It
makes it fun too. I mean, they're understanding the story. They're, you're bringing creativity into it. For them, they probably love it. They're like,
and Dad's dressed up with all his Mordecai stuff, and whatever. They're like, yeah, can we do family time every day? They love it. So that's a great way to bring little kids into Bible stories.
The creativity. Yeah, my kids, they love stories. I mean, and so at night, a lot of times it's a story. It's a story. And so I just pick one and tell it, in a way it keeps their attention and they can relate to. Like last week, I was laying in bed telling the story of David.
Yeah.
And how he was a shepherd.
Yeah.
And, I'm sitting there, I'm telling the story, and I'm like, and David was a shepherd, and my boy Josh was like, well, how old was he? And I was like, well, I don't know. He was like, I don't know, like he was because he's young, he's like 4, and so I'm like, well, he was a little boy, and I was like, he's like 10 or 11 or 12, and he's like, oh, so he's a big boy, and I'm like, well, sure, but he's a little boy, and he's like, okay, well, how many years? And I was like, I don't know exactly. How many sheep did he have, Dad? Well, when he left to go to the military camp, who watched the sheep? So he's like, so worried about the sheep, and I'm like, we'll get back to that,